I remember the night as clearly as if it were etched into glass. It was late, later than I had promised her, but I had good reason. I'd stayed behind at work, overtime that I didn't technically need to do, so I could tuck away just a little more money. I had been planning something, a weekend trip for her birthday, maybe Paris if I could stretch it, something to make her smile again, something to remind her that love could still be soft and surprising. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark except for the glow spilling faintly from the upstairs window. Our window. It should have been comforting, but the sight of it made me pause. The house felt different. You know that feeling? When a place you know by heart seems suddenly foreign, as though someone rearranged the air inside. I stepped to the front door and immediately sensed it. Subtle but unmistakable. A second wine glass sat on the counter, a deep red smear drying at its rim. She rarely drank alone, and she never left glasses out. My stomach tightened, but my mind, ever eager to rationalize, supplied explanations. Maybe a friend stopped by. Maybe she wanted company. But then came the smell. My cologne, not the faint, lived-in trace that clings to hallways and shirts. This was fresh, sharp, like it had been sprayed only moments before. I hadn't touched it that morning. I placed my keys down carefully, as though the slightest noise might shatter the fragile illusion I was clinging to. That's when I saw it. A jacket slung carelessly over the chair in the dining room. Too large to be hers, too unfamiliar to be mine. My heart started a slow, heavy pounding. Each beat echoed in my ears as I climbed the stairs, gripping the banister like it might keep me from collapsing. I already knew. Deep down, I already knew. But there's a cruel part of the mind that insists on seeing the blade even when it's already buried in you. At the bedroom door, I hesitated. A murmur, a laugh hers. Not the laugh I fell in love with, light and unguarded, but something else. Softer, secretive. I pushed the door open. Time fractured. My wife, the woman I had built my life around, was in bed with him. A stranger. His skin against hers. His arm draped possessively across her body as though I had been erased, deleted from the picture of my own marriage. He didn't scramble. He didn't apologize. He didn't even look ashamed. He looked at me the way a predator looks at something weak. He sat up slowly, his muscles tensing under his skin, and with a smirk that carved itself into my memory, he flexed his arms deliberately, like I had stumbled into some cruel performance. And then he said it. She chose a strong man over a weak husband. The words landed heavier than any punch I had ever taken. They cracked something inside me. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. My wife, my partner, looked away, her silence louder than his mockery. She didn't defend me. She didn't deny him. Her eyes fixed on the sheets, and in that silence, she might as well have said, "He's right." I don't remember how I walked out. My legs moved before my mind caught up. The hall blurred. The staircase stretched like a tunnel. I gripped the ring on my finger, twisting it unconsciously, the metal cutting into my skin as if reminding me of the vows I had made, the vows she had broken. Outside, the night air hit me like ice. I stood in the driveway, my body trembling, not from cold but from something rawer, deeper, rage, humiliation, a grief so vast it hollowed me out. I turned to the car, and there it was, my reflection in the window, distorted by the glass, fractured by the angle. I barely recognized a man staring back. His shoulders slumped, his eyes wide and vacant, his jaw slacked like someone caught mid-fall. That wasn't me. That couldn't be me. But it was. I didn't cry. Not yet. The silence inside me was too loud, too complete. It pressed against my skull, echoing with the man's words. She chose a strong man, a strong man, a strong man. I pressed my forehead to the cool glass of the car, closing my eyes. For a long moment, I just breathed, as though I might find myself again in the rhythm. But all I found was emptiness. And then the question, the one that sat heavy on my chest as the house behind me seemed to shrink into a stranger's home. What does a man do when his entire identity collapses in a single moment? I didn't know, but I knew I was already falling. In the days after that night, I kept replaying not just what I saw, but everything that came before it. Memories became weapons. Things I once held sacred now cut me open, piece by piece. I first met her at a friend's birthday party years ago. She wasn't the most beautiful woman in the room, but she had something else, an energy that pulled people in. She laughed easily, like laughter was her native language, and when she turned that brightness on me, I felt chosen. She teased me about the way I stir my drink too long, said it made me look nervous, and I remember stammering some clumsy reply. But she laughed, touched my arm, and in that moment I was already gone. I wasn't a man who believed in fate, but with her, it felt close enough. In the early days, everything was effortless. We stayed up too late, talking about books, about traveling, about the kind of house we might live in someday. She liked to dream big, and I liked to promise her those dreams. A dangerous combination, though I didn't know it then. Looking back, I can see the red flags, bright as fire alarms, though I muted them at the time. She loved being admired, not just by me, but by anyone who would look. At restaurants, she'd tilt her chin just so, knowing heads would turn. At parties, she let her hand linger a little too long on another man's arm, watching me out of the corner of her eye to see if I noticed. I did. I always did. But I told myself it didn't matter. She came home with me. After all, isn't that what counted? Love makes you an optimist. Or a fool. Sometimes both. When we married, I wore my loyalty like armor. I believed that if I gave enough time, energy, sacrifice, then everything would last. The watch she gave me on our wedding day had forever engraved on the back. I used to turn it over my palm during long meetings. The metal warmed from my skin, and I'd smile. I thought forever meant something unbreakable. The truth is, forever is only as strong as the weaker link in the chain. I sacrificed more than I admitted, even to myself. Early in our marriage, I turned down a promotion that would have doubled my salary. The job required travel, weeks away from home, and she said she didn't want a marriage where we lived on opposite schedules. So I said no. I told myself I was choosing love over ambition. But in quiet moments, I wondered what kind of man I could have been if I'd said yes. Then came her dream business. She wanted to open a boutique, a place with her name above the door. She lit up when she talked about it, and I wanted to keep that light burning. So I cashed out a portion of the savings I had worked years to build. We signed papers. We took risks. I told myself it was worth it. That's what a husband does, right? He invests in his wife's dreams. But when the business faltered, when the bills started stacking up, it wasn't her who bore the weight. It was me. I picked up extra hours, side projects, late nights at the office. I carried it because I believed in her, because I believed in us. Somewhere along the line, I lost touch with the people who mattered outside of her. My closest friend, James, pulled me aside once after a dinner party. He asked if I was happy, said she didn't seem to treat me with the respect I deserved. I laughed it off, told him he was imagining things. After that, I saw him less and less. Not because he stopped calling, but because I stopped answering. Anyone who questioned her place in my life felt like an enemy, even if they meant well. Isolation is subtle. You don't notice it until the silence around you feels normal. Our home became filled with tokens of life I thought we were building. Framed photos from trips, her leaning into me on a mountain trail, our smiles wide, my arm holding her close. Her favorite wine glasses on the shelf, delicate and thin, the kind that broke if you looked at them too hard. The engraved watch in my drawer, the scent of her perfume lingering on the pillows. They were props, I see now. Props in a play where I was the only one reciting lines from the heart. And yet, I clung to those symbols, convinced they were proof of something real. When she began staying out late, I convinced myself it was work or stress or exhaustion. When she rolled her eyes at my attempts at affection, I told myself it was just a phase. When she critiqued me, my clothes, my salary, my lack of drive, I swallowed it like medicine, bitter but necessary. The irony, of course, is that I thought loyalty would hold us together, but it became the very rope she used to pull me along, shaping me into something smaller, more accommodating, easier to leave behind. Looking back, I see the truth. She didn't slip away overnight. She had been leaving in pieces, long before the night I caught her. With every glance at another man, with every dismissive comment, With every moment I sacrificed myself for her without asking for anything back. She was already gone, and I was complicit, because I thought love meant staying blind, because I thought promises weighed the same for both of us. I remember sitting on the couch one evening, not long before the discovery. She was scrolling on her phone, her face lit by the screen, laughter spilling from her lips at something she wouldn't share. I watched her, my chest tight, wanting to ask what she found so funny, but I didn't. Instead, I reached for the watch on my wrist, running my thumb across the engraving. Forever. I told myself it was enough. But forever, I've learned, isn't a promise you carve into metal. It's a choice you make every single day. And she had stopped making that choice long before I realized. So when I look back now, I see a man who gave everything, time, trust, money, even his identity, believing it would be enough. And in return, she gave me a stranger in my own home. The morning after I walked out of that bedroom, the world felt hollow. I woke on the couch, still wearing yesterday's clothes, my body aching as though I'd been in a fight. In a way I had, though not with fists. I had fought against the truth, and the truth had won. The house was quiet, too quiet. Silence has weight when you know what it hides. I sat there staring at the empty wine glasses, still on the counter. I couldn't bring myself to wash them, as if touching them would confirm the nightmare wasn't a dream. She came downstairs eventually, wearing a robe like it was just another Sunday morning. Her face was unreadable, calm, almost bored. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but when I opened my mouth, nothing came out. My throat felt sewn shut. Finally, I managed, "Why?" She shrugged, poured herself coffee, and said, "We're not working anymore. You know that. Not working anymore." Like we were a broken appliance. Like years of love and sacrifice could be reduced to a faulty blender she was ready to toss out. I stood there, stunned. I wanted her to cry, to beg forgiveness, to feel something. But she didn't. She stirred her coffee, sipping it slowly, as if my devastation were an inconvenience. And then he walked down the stairs, still shirtless, still smug. He looked at me the way men look at stray dogs in the street, annoyed, dismissive. "Man, don't make this harder than it is," he said, flexing his arms as if to remind me of what I wasn't. I clenched my fists, but I didn't move. Violence burned in my chest. But I knew if I swung, I'd lose more than I already had. She didn't intervene. She didn't tell him to stop, didn't defend me. Her silence was worse than the insult. It told me she agreed with him. I walked out, this time for real. The weeks that followed were a blur. Nights bled into mornings. Sleep didn't come easily. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the sound of her laugh in my head. Only now it was sharper, crueler. Every memory I had of her rewrote itself with malice, as if my mind wanted me to suffer by showing me the truth I had missed all along. At work, my performance slipped. I missed deadlines, forgot meetings. My boss pulled me aside once, asking if I was okay. I lied and said I was fine. But I wasn't. Everyone knew it. Colleagues whispered behind my back, pity in their eyes. I could feel it. The humiliation followed me everywhere. Food lost its taste. Music became noise. Even the air seemed heavier. The wedding ring became unbearable. At first, I couldn't take it off. It felt fused to my skin, a reminder of everything I had lost. But one night, as I washed my hands, I looked down at it glinting in the bathroom light. I twisted it slowly, slid it off, and placed it on the edge of the sink. For a moment, I just stared at it. Then I nudged it with my fingertip, watching it wobble, spin, and settle, its reflection warped in the porcelain. It looked so small, so insignificant compared to the weight it had carried. The next morning, it was still there untouched. She hadn't bothered to move it. Maybe she didn't even notice. My lowest point came one night when the silence became unbearable. I sat in the living room with a half-empty bottle of whiskey, staring at the watch she had given me on our wedding day. The engraving on the back, "Forever," blurred through my tears. I whispered the word out loud, and it sounded ridiculous. Empty. I thought about ending it, not in some grand, dramatic gesture, but in a quiet surrender, just letting the bottle take me under, slipping away into the dark. It wasn't that I wanted to die. I just didn't know how to keep living like this. That's when I heard my father's voice in my head. Not literally, but in memory. He had been a man of few words, but the ones he chose always stuck. When I was younger, after a fight at school left me bruised and embarrassed, he'd sat me down and said, "Strength isn't in muscle, son. It's in what you endure and still rise from." At the time, I didn't understand. I thought strength was about fists and force. But now, sitting there in the ruins of my life, I realized what he meant. I wasn't strong because I had lost. I wasn't strong because I had been humiliated. But maybe, just maybe, I could become strong by surviving it, by refusing to stay broken. I poured the whiskey down the sink, watched it swirl and vanish, like the ring I had left behind. Then I grabbed my coat and stepped outside. The night air was sharp, filling my lungs with something that felt almost like relief. I walked without direction, my footsteps echoing in the empty streets. The city was asleep, but I felt awake for the first time in weeks. I didn't know where I was going. All I knew was that I couldn't keep living inside that silence, inside the house where every wall whispered betrayal. As I walked, I thought about all the promises I had made, all the sacrifices I had given. They had weighed me down, chained me to her. But now they were ashes. And maybe in the ashes, something new could grow. For the first time since it all began, I felt the faintest flicker of something other than despair. It wasn't hope, not yet, but it was the seed of it. And I realized something important. The man she chose, the one who mocked me, thought strength was in his arms, in his body. He thought he had won because he was a louder, prouder presence in the room. But real strength wasn't about that. Real strength was quiet, patient. It was an endurance, an ability to carry unbearable weight and still move forward. I wasn't there yet, but maybe I could be. That night, I kept walking, past the familiar streets, past the old routines, away from the ruins of the man I had been. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew I had taken the first step. And though I was stripped of everything, my marriage, my pride, my identity, I wasn't empty. Not completely. Somewhere deep inside, a new beginning was waiting. I just had to survive long enough to find it. The day I realized I was no longer drowning came quietly, without fanfare. I woke one morning, sunlight cutting through the cheap blinds of my apartment, and instead of feeling that old heaviness pressing me back into the mattress, I felt space. A strange clarity. It wasn't joy, not yet, but it was an absence of suffocation. I sat up, poured coffee into a chipped mug, and wrote in my notebook. For months, my words had been jagged. Anger, grief, endless loops of self-blame. But that morning, my hand moved differently. I wasn't writing about her or him anymore. I was writing about me, who I was before, who I might become. It struck me then, grief is a kind of fire. It can consume or it can refine. And I was tired of being burned to ash. I started treating my body as if it were a vessel worth saving. Walking turned to running. Running turned to lifting cheap weights I bought secondhand. At first, my muscles trembled, my lungs burned, but slowly, repetition carved away weakness. Sweat became a baptism, washing away the residue of betrayal. Every drop felt like reclaiming something stolen. My strength had been mocked, dismissed, belittled. Yet here I was, building it quietly in a dimly lit apartment with no one watching. I also began reading again. Philosophy, memoirs, even old dog-eared novels from college. Late at night, I devoured the words of men and women who had faced their own storms. I underlined passages that spoke to me. A man who conquers himself is greater than one who conquers a city. I taped those words to my wall. Each quote became a brick in the foundation of a new life. Knowledge, I realized, was its own form of muscle. One evening, at the diner, the waitress, her name was Claire, I finally learned, noticed a notebook I always carried. "You a writer?" she asked, her voice tired but kind. I almost laughed. Not really, just trying to untangle myself. She poured me another cup of coffee on the house. "Keep writing," she said. Sometimes the only way through hell is to leave breadcrumbs on paper. Her words struck me harder than I expected. I began writing with more purpose, not just venting, but shaping the story, capturing the symbols of my unraveling, the ring, the watch, the empty house. I didn't know it then, but those words would later become part of the justice I sought. Months passed. Seasons shifted. The man in the mirror changed. The hollow eye softened. The slouch straightened. My hands, once shaky, grew steady. One Saturday, while jogging by the river, I passed a couple holding hands. Instead of pain, I felt distance. They were just two people. Their happiness didn't diminish me. That was when I knew the exile had done its work. But then came the spark that turned survival into preparation. It happened at work. I was in the break room, scrolling through my phone, when a coworker whispered, "Hey, isn't that your wife?" I looked up. On his screen was a social media post. Her, smiling, radiant, with him at her side. They were flaunting their happiness, broadcast it like a trophy. The caption, "Found my true strength." My coworker apologized, but it was too late. The words were branded into me. That night, I didn't collapse like before. I didn't rage or break. Instead, I felt something sharper. Clean, focused, strength. If they want to make their triumph public, then one day, their downfall could be public too. From then on, my writing shifted. It wasn't just reflection anymore. It was documentation. Timelines, quotes, conversations I remembered word for word, financial records I dug up, receipts I had buried in drawers. Every detail that revealed the truth of who they were, who I had been, and how betrayal had unfolded. It wasn't about revenge, not in the cheap sense. It was about truth, about taking back my narrative from the mockery they had reduced it to. The symbolism of fire returned to me often. I thought of the phoenix, ashes into armor, ruin into rebirth. I bought a simple pendant of a phoenix and wore it beneath my shirt, hidden. It wasn't jewelry. It was a promise to myself. I would rise. Even the little things became rituals of power. I cooked real meals again, simple but nourishing. I replaced my mattress with a proper bed. I hung a mirror by the door, and each morning, before leaving, I looked into it and whispered, "Not weak." It may sound foolish, but those small declarations stitched me back together. Claire noticed the changes too. One night, after pouring my coffee, she said, "You look taller these days." I chuckled. "I haven't grown." "Not in inches," she replied. "In presence." Her words stayed with me. Presence. That was what I had lost, what betrayal stripped from me, and what I was now reclaiming. The final shift came when I revisited the house. I hadn't set foot there in over a year, but I drove by one evening. Lights glowed in the windows. I imagined them inside, their lives layered over the walls I had once painted, the floor I had once walked barefoot across. I parked across the street, my hands gripping the steering wheel. My chest tightened, but I didn't crumble. Instead, I whispered to myself, "It's not my home anymore. My home is wherever I carry peace." I drove away lighter. By then, I knew what had to come. Confrontation, not with fists or shouting, but with truth, with undeniable clarity. I had spent too long letting their voices define me. Him, with his smirk and his flexed muscles. Her, with her dismissal of my worth. But now I had my armor, strength in my body, clarity in my mind, and the story written in my own words. I was no longer a man defined by betrayal. I was a man forged by it, and the time was approaching when I would return, not to beg, not to rage, but to show them what real strength looked like. Strength wasn't in taking. Strength wasn't in betrayal. Strength was in surviving the fire and walking out carrying your own light. The day I returned to face them wasn't planned with fireworks or vengeance in mind. It was quiet, deliberate, almost ceremonial. I wore a clean shirt, pressed slacks, and the phoenix pendant beneath my collar. Not for them, for me, a reminder of who I had become. In my hand, I carried a leather binder filled with everything I had gathered, documents, photographs, the journal entries that traced my descent and my rise. It wasn't rage that guided me that morning. Rage had burned out long ago, leaving behind something sharper, calmer. Justice. I asked her to meet me at a cafe. Neutral ground. Public enough to keep tempers checked. Quiet enough for words to land. When she arrived, she was as radiant as ever, but it was a radiance I no longer envied. It was paint on a cracked wall, vibrant but hollow. Across from me, she smiled politely, almost nervously. It's been a long time. Yes, I said, my voice steady. Long enough to see clearly. I placed a binder between us. She glanced at it, then back at me, wary. What is this? The story, I answered. Not the one you, and he told. Not the version where I was weak. The real one. Her hands tightened around her coffee cup. She tried to mask it, but I saw the flicker of unease in her eyes. For years, I had memorized those eyes, their warmth, their lies. Now I saw them without filter. You don't have to, she began. I do. I cut in, calm but firm. Because for too long you defined me. You told me what I was, what I wasn't, and I believed you. But no more. I opened the binder. Inside, I had organized everything. Receipts that showed how I carried the weight of our life while she drifted away. Screenshots of conversations where she belittled me, where he mocked me. Notes from mutual friends who had seen betrayal long before I did. Piece by piece, I laid it out, not angrily, methodically, like a surgeon revealing the sickness that had been eating away unseen. Her lips parted, words stumbling out, but I didn't give space for deflection. This, I said, tapping the page, is the truth you ran from. You thought mocking me made you powerful. You thought leaving me broken made you free. But what you never understood is that real strength isn't found in betrayal. It's found in rebuilding. Her face paled. I could see the cracks forming. The confident woman who once looked at me with disdain now struggled to meet my gaze. For the first time in years, I held the ground between us. Then he arrived. Late as always, swaggered a step. The so-called strong man. He walked up, saw me sitting across from her, and smirked. Didn't think you'd have the guts to show your face. He flexed his shoulders, like the caricature he was. I didn't rise. I didn't flinch. Instead, I closed the binder calmly and looked him dead in the eye. You once told me she chose strength over weakness. Tell me, does strength look like hiding behind another man's wife? Or flaunting what isn't yours as if that makes you more? His smirk faltered, just a flicker, but enough. I leaned forward slightly, my voice low and unwavering. You mistook silence for weakness. You mistook kindness for submission. But the man you mocked doesn't exist anymore. The cafe had grown quiet around us. People were watching now, not intentionally, but because the air between us pulsed with tension. I pulled out one final page from the binder, a letter I had written to myself months ago, back when I thought survival was impossible. It was raw, broken, filled with doubt. I read it aloud. My voice didn't shake. When I finished, I folded it neatly and slid across the table. That was who I was, I said, but not anymore. He tried to laugh it off, but it rang hollow. She shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting to the floor. And me? I felt nothing but release. I don't need revenge, I told him quietly. You've already built your own prison. Every photo you post, every lie you tell, is another bar in the cage you live in. I don't envy it. I don't want it. I'm free. Silence. Heavy, undeniable silence. I stood, gathering my binder. For the first time, I didn't feel small walking away. I felt immense, not because I had destroyed them, but because I no longer needed to. Outside, the air smelled of rain. I walked slowly, deliberately, each step lighter than the last. Behind me, their world trembled. Ahead of me, mine opened. I touched the phoenix pendant at my chest. Strength wasn't about overpowering them. It wasn't about winning some competition of ego. Strength was about standing in your truth, unashamed, unbroken. Weeks later, I heard whispers. Their relationship fractured, arguments spilling out where once there had been smugness. People who once believed their story began to see through it. But by then, I didn't care. Their downfall wasn't my burden to track. My life had become mine again. I wrote, I ran, I lived, and when I looked in the mirror, I no longer saw the man who had been mocked, betrayed, humiliated. I saw a man forged in fire. I saw strength. And for the first time in years, I smiled, not because I had won against him, but because I had finally won back myself.